For analysis on the election, let's turn to Aurel Braun. He's a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. Great to have you on the show, Aurel. Now, at this point, Erdogan is the favourite to win the runoff. Now, opposition candidate Kılıçdaroğlu was ahead in the polls, but he didn't do as well as expected. What do you put that down to?
Clearly, this was where nationalism played a role, with the advantages that were enjoyed by Mr. Erdogan, and he used them to the full. That is, the media, the organization, the funds that he had access to came to his advantage. The OECD said that this was not an entirely fair election in the sense that the government had accrued so many advantages that it could employ, but nonetheless, a vast number of Turks had voted, and contrary to the expectation of a number of polls which had suggested that Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was going to get more than 50%, Mr. Erdogan did do better, but he is now, unusually for him, facing a runoff, and runoffs are unpredictable.
I mean, this election has come at a time where there are so many huge issues in Turkey, record high inflation, not to mention the recovery efforts following the earthquake. How did Turkey's economy affect the vote, do you think? And how do people in Turkey view the AK Party in terms of Turkey's record high inflation? Is it a situation where they blame the AK Party, or do they see it as a symptom of events that were out of the government's control, like the war in Syria and the conflict in Ukraine?
The fact that the opposition was able to largely unite, that they were able to bring 6 parties together, that they came this close to defeating Mr. Erdogan, indicates that indeed the economy has been an important factor, and the Turkish economy is in very bad shape. Inflation is enormous. The growth rate has slowed, or in some cases disappeared. The handling of the earthquake by the government was appallingly bad, but Mr. Erdogan was able to play on the worst instincts of the Turkish people. That is, a fear of the outside world, a fear of conspiracies, xenophobia, and the mistrust of any minorities, including the Kurds, and he played on that. But there may be buyer's remorse. So this is why we don't know what will happen in 2 weeks' time, because it is conceivable that as people look at the situation and they realize that they may have voted out of certain nationalistic aspirations, but the pocketbook issues do not go away, that the international concerns that have been caused by Mr. Erdogan are just going to multiply because there are disputes with NATO, disputes with the EU, it may be possible that Mr. Erdogan will not prevail, but the odds are in his favor nonetheless because of the elements that he controls, and also the fact that his party was able to win a majority, not as large as before, but a majority in parliament. So he would be able to make the argument that he does not want to have a split government.
It certainly seems like Erdogan and perhaps Kılıçdaroğlu, acted on a paradigm of culture wars, much like what we're seeing here in the US. But from an international perspective, talk to us a bit about the difference between the foreign policy agendas of both candidates. Turkey and the West have experienced strained relations, but how would an opposition leader like Kılıçdaroğlu change Turkey, especially with nations and the relationship with China and Russia?
Well, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu wants to bring Turkey back more closely into the fold of NATO and wants to move towards eventual membership in the EU. And that would mean that he would distance himself more from Russia. Mr. Erdogan has sort of played both sides of the street. You may recall that he sold drones to Ukraine, which were deadly in terms of their use against Russian forces during the invasion back in 2022. But at the same time, he has blocked the accession of Sweden to NATO. He has been a thorn in the side of the alliance. He has not cooperated in many areas when it came to boosting Ukrainian defenses. So overall, he has been an asset for Mr. Putin, and if he loses, Mr. Putin might lose that asset. Now, in terms of China, Turkey is a country of 85 million people with a large economy, so there's likely to be continuing strong economic relations between Turkey and China, and it's a different kind of situation. They do not have the same kind of history or the tensions that exist between Russia and Turkey in the Black Sea.
All right, Aurel Braun, thanks very much for your time, Professor of International Relations and Political Science at the University of Toronto.